Hello, hello, FedPhoenix fam. So, today I'm going to do a short video about bonds in the federal system, which are a type of cashless bond, by the way. Sometimes you'll be in prison or after prison when you talk to people that have been to federal prison, and they'll say, oh, I had to put up $100,000 for my bond. Oh, I had to, put up my boat in my house. These aren't true things. Now, I don't know what it was 20, 30 years ago, 10 years ago, but I know what it is right now, right? So, in the federal system, one of the things that federal probation does, right? They supervise your pre-sentence release, if you get that, which is another word for bond in the Fed. They will also do your PSI. They give a recommendation to the judge regarding your sentencing, or if a particular type of sentencing is being asked for by the prosecution or defense. Sometimes they'll give an opinion on that. When you get out of prison, when you're in the halfway house, before you even get to the halfway house, before you get out of prison, federal probation will go check out, your home, where you're supposed to be going, post halfway house or straight from prison if you're maxing out. The federal probation, they do a lot. They do a whole lot, and it's not just like what we think probation, in most state prisons, you do prison time, or, probation's like an alternative to prison time. The federal probation department does a lot of things. And one of the things they do is they assess pretty quickly, within the time frame of you getting indicted or charged, or a lot of times before, if you're a candidate for pre-sentence release, aka bond. And how they assess this is they look at, do you have strong ties in the community? Do you have a lot of things holding you where you're at to keep you from running? Do you have the financial means to run, to try to leave the state or it's federal, so maybe the country? Do you have any disabilities or limitations that would make running from the feds, which, if you go on the run, the marshals will come hunt you down, more difficult or less likely? Do you have dependents or loved ones you care for? And this isn't like your dog. This is like your mom or your kids, that are more likely to cause a situation where you're less likely to go. They look at your criminal history. Do you have any history of violence? Do you have any documented history of escapes within the criminal justice system, state or federal? They look at a lot of factors. They look at, are you a substance abuser? Just a lot of things like that. And basically they kind of assess and figure out, is this person, if we allow them to stay home prior to their sentencing, is it likely they're going to actually show up for court, right? And so if the answer to that is yes, they're likely going to show up for court, then generally what happens is you are on pre-sentence release, aka federal bond. Now, when you sign your paperwork with the marshals that allows you to be on this, because it's actually through the marshal service, because if you go on the run, they're the ones responsible to look for you, right? So if you get pre-sentence release, if you get federal bond, you will be processed by the marshals. They'll take your fingerprints, they'll take pictures. A lot of times they take pictures of tattoos, scars. They take a DNA swab, all this kind of stuff. So if you go on the run, they have as much information as possible to hunt you down as quickly as possible. And now some people, if and when they get pre-sentence release, they have to wear an ankle monitor. And if you have to wear an ankle monitor, when you're on pre-sentence release, you're supervised by federal probation, by the way. But people have to wear ankle monitors. Sometimes those are people they're given pre-sentence release under the condition that they're basically on house arrest. There are other people who are on pre-sentence release that have to wear an ankle monitor because maybe they were slightly higher risk that don't have any house arrest. It's basically just to see, are you staying within the area you're supposed to be staying? If a crime is committed, can they prove or disprove that you were present? That kind of thing. A lot of people on pre-sentence release don't require an ankle monitor. And they look at your ties outside the country. So if you're Canadian, if your family is from Canada or Mexico or whatever, and you're a U.S. citizen, if you have family, particularly wealthy family in another country, that can hinder you getting pre-sentence release as well. But when you sign your paperwork with the marshals, it'll say that you were out on bond, right? And I forget how much mine was, maybe $100,000. It's always some crazy number, but it's a cashless bond system, pre-sentence releases. So mine may have been like 100,000. I know that the numbers tend to be really crazy. And basically what you're signing this paperwork saying is, in the event that they have to come find you, that you don't show up for court or you don't do what you're supposed to do, that you would then owe them that much money, because your agreement in this pre-sentence release is you're going to show up to court dates, you're not going to be under the influence of drugs, that kind of thing. If you don't follow that and you're taken into custody by the marshals, you then will owe the amount of money of your bond. So if you don't mess up, your finances are pretty much irrelevant, other than, if your finances are a factor and your ability to move, to run. So being poor would not be a hindrance in this situation. In fact, it would kind of be an asset, assuming you don't have a violent past and, that kind of thing. But a lot of times I've seen so many people, and I've heard so many people say, the feds don't give bonds, they give deals. And there are two types of people who use this phrase. There are the people who, when they or a loved one, was indicted or arrested or whatever by the feds, had a history of previous incarcerations. Maybe they didn't have a stable residence. Maybe they were under the influence of drugs. Maybe they had drugs in their system. Maybe they have a history of rampant drug use. These are people who just simply did not meet the qualifications for pre-sentence release. And they assume, well, I didn't, if they didn't tell on anybody, and maybe they have a co-defendant who did get pre-sentence release who happened to also be a snitch, then they make that correlation and they go, oh, the feds don't give bonds, they give deals. That's not really. Now, there may be some people that part of the package they get for telling on folks is maybe they're given more consideration, more leniency to get pre-sentence release. I don't really know. That wasn't my situation. And honestly, when people contact me to help them on their journey, if they inform me, or if it's very obvious that they were an informant against another person, I stop my association with them, because I really feel like that's very vile. And it's just not, it's one of my deal breakers for wanting to voluntarily, proactively be of assistance to you. So as well as people that hurt kids and that kind of thing. I just don't, I feel like it'd be bad juju to deal with that, but that's neither here nor there. Now let's say you don't have a history of drug abuse, right? Of substance abuse, maybe alcohol. You don't really have a documented history, but when you were arrested and you were taken to jail, or when the marshals processed you, there was some alcohol in your system, like a high level, or maybe there was some cocaine in your system or whatever. It is quite possible, or if they just suspect that you're an active drug user, but other than that, you meet all the criteria for pre-sentence release. A lot of times you'll go on pre-sentence release, but your pre-sentence release will be done in a secured drug treatment facility. Now, you may be asking yourself, why would basically the choices there are rehab and jail, and depending on the jail and depending on the rehab, jail might be better in some cases. And that's fair, especially if you're a person that wants to continue to do substances, and have no desire to stop. But I will say that what I've seen through other people's experiences is when they do the rehab on pre-sentence release, and it's always a locked rehab, you can't just walk out or sign yourself out, because you're there as a term of your pre-sentence release. There's a legal thing keeping you there. But those people tend to fare better with their judges, especially if the rehab, the treatment facility, says that they were cooperative and they've made progress, and their criminal conduct is associated with their substance abuse, and that may potentially be in the rear view at this point. Judges definitely give a little consideration to that. So, sorry, I got a text thing popping up on top of my phone looking at it. But now your pre-sentence release, a lot of people have asked me, well, if I get pre-sentence release, whatever those conditions are, when I come home from prison, will my probation conditions be the same, pretty much? First off, not necessarily. I mean, a lot can change during that time. Perhaps on pre-sentence, you had frequent drug tests for whatever reason. Maybe you had a drug charge, which even if you're not a drug user, drug testing is something you're gonna have to expect if your charge is anything related to drugs, even if you don't do drugs. But maybe you had drug testing in the pre-sentence, but you're not really a drug user. So when you come home, perhaps you do or do not have to do some drug testing. Or if you do, perhaps it's just for a very short window of time. There maybe have been a stipulation in your pre-sentence, a lot. And then you got to think too, between pre-sentence release and after prison probation, right? You're going to have your PSI, you're going to have your sentencing, the judge is going to do your J&C, your judgment and committal, which is the document where the judge explains why he sentenced you the way he didn't give you more time, less time, whatever. And that'll also include any mandatory conditions that's in your J&C of your probation when you are released from the Bureau of Prisons custody. And you can look at that while you're incarcerated. You can have your lawyer, or you can, before even if you're in jail being transferred, whatever, if you're free, you can get it. But you can look at your J&C and you can already kind of know what the terms of your probation after prison will be. Oh, and the second type of people who say the feds don't give bonds, they give deals, are people that really have no clue firsthand, or maybe not even secondhand, about how all this works. And they just see stuff on social media or hear stuff and whatever. And they just kind of are people who are functioning from a standpoint of complete ignorance, that are very easily influenced and just kind of buy whatever's thrown their way. Sad as that is. But I can say the majority of people that I've heard use this phrase or go down that road are people who more often than not had co-defendants who did tell, and the co-defendants got pre-sentence release and they didn't. Now, sometimes too, you won't get pre-sentence release because in those situations particularly, perhaps y'all really kind of did the same thing, and the person who's telling is looking at 5 years, you're looking at maybe 15, because they're being useful to the prosecution or whatever. And another thing too is if you're looking at more time, judges tend to be leery about giving you pre-sentence release as well, because the likelihood that you're going to run is obviously higher. But in those kind of situations, they may say that the person who snitched is getting pre-sentence release, aside from the fact they generally meet the conditions, but because, being incarcerated puts them in danger because they're a snitch. This is a person who may end up at a dropout yard or probably go to a camp, depending on their criminal history and all that kind of stuff. But, so the fact that, if y'all both would otherwise qualify for pre-sentence release, right? But this person told you didn't. And now this person is looking at 5 years, you're looking at 15. There's a very good chance that you're not going to get pre-sentence release. Because you're looking at, a lot of times if you're looking at over 10 years, judges do not want to give you pre-sentence release because there's a greater likelihood you're going to get cold feet, not show up to court, not turn yourself into prison, that kind of thing. Or if you get it, you're going to be on an ankle monitor. But you don't have to have collateral. You don't have to have money. You don't have to have any kind of economic or financial resources to get pre-sentence release, aka bond with the feds. And it is a cashless bond system. So you don't have to put any collateral up. You don't have to put any money up. It's not like most state bond systems. But if you go on the run, even if you didn't go on the run, let's say you got caught in traffic, you're on your way to court, you end up being late, and you're calling, and you just get a judge who's having a bad day and decides, you know what, I'm going to put you down as a no-show, contempt of court, issue a warrant. Now you owe the feds the amount of money that your bond was the value of the cashless bond. So if it was $100,000, now when you get sentenced, one of the conditions, one of the things that's going to be included in your sentence is now you have to reimburse, which I guarantee you they ain't spending that, but reimburse that amount of money to the U.S. Marshal Service, to the federal courts. So I will say that, if you get pre-sentence release, and generally pre-sentence release is given to nonviolent victimless crimes, first-time offenders, the elderly, the disabled, the single moms, the single dads, people that are extremely recognizable in public, people that are very active in their communities. There are certain groups, definitely not being a substance abuser will help significantly in getting pre-sentence release, previous or current. But you got to always keep in mind, because I know a lot of people are thinking like, ooh, I'll get pre-sentence release and I'm going to live it up before I go to prison. Don't do it. Just please, for the love of God, don't do it. Because here's the thing. If you get pulled over, if your PO pops up, there are 100 things that can go wrong. And if any of these things goes wrong, you're going to be taken into custody, pre-sentence release is off the table, and you may very well end up owing the amount that the pre-sentence release, the bond, that was for. And you don't want to put yourself in that position. You don't want to risk that. And you also don't want to risk having less time with your loved ones and less time to get your business in order prior to prison in the free world, because, it's happy hour at the bar and your friends are going to be there. Because you did a little coke in college, and now that you're 30-something going to prison, you want to live the old times and do a line with some idiot, it's just not worth it, and if you're in a situation, if your home situation is one where maybe there's potential for domestic violence, maybe you're the aggressor, maybe the other person is, maybe y'all both are, if you live in a situation where there's potential where if your PO comes, they're going to find something they shouldn't because of the other people in the environment or the environment in general, then I strongly advise at that point that you try to find another suitable living arrangement and wait until you found it first, and then go to your PO and say, listen, I don't feel like this environment, and you ain't got to tell anybody, whatever. You don't got to be very specific, but it's just not conducive to me maintaining myself or doing the things I need to do while I'm pre-sentence release. However, here's an alternative address that I feel is more conducive and, I think will be more supportive. I would like to change my home address. And more often than not, if you're not coming at them entitled and rude and crazy, generally speaking, they're going to kind of be like, okay, well, I got to go, I'm going to have to schedule and do a home check. I need the name and number of, whoever the head of household is or the owner is or whatever. But it's a fairly simple thing. And a lot of people don't do that when they need to because they're worried this is going to like draw attention to their situation. They're worried that the judge is going to say, well, your home situation is obviously not a stable one if you want to leave it. So I'm gonna rescind your pre-sentence release. Those aren't things that you would need to worry about in those situations. So, and again, if you want to know what your conditions of probation will be when you get out of prison, definitely whether you get pre-sentence release or not, you can ask before, whatever. You can even ask when you're in prison. Ask your caseworker. Tell them you need a copy of your J&C, your judgment and committal. And your judgment and committal will pretty much outline, that's kind of done by the judge, he looks at the conditions of your pre-sentence release, or if you didn't get it, the list of typical federal probationary conditions. And sometimes they'll scratch something out, sometimes they'll modify something, sometimes they add something. But yeah, so that's pretty much the rundown on bond in the federal system, on pre-sentence release in the federal system. Usually if you have a warrant, even if it's in another state and it's something minor, a lot of times you won't get pre-sentence release because you have a detainer somewhere else, a charge somewhere else that's pending, no matter how old it is or how small it is. But yeah, so because I've had a lot of people ask me, a lot of people have said to me, well, I'm going to my plea hearing next week, and I'm not a wealthy person. How am I going to afford my bond if the judge lets me have bond? Or, I don't really have a lot of assets in my name, but, my mother and my ex-wife's house are in my name. Do they need to bring the deeds? Do I need to bring the deeds? Do we need to put those up? No. It's, cashless bond systems are very different than traditional cash bond systems. And again, the main thing from my personal experience and what I've observed with others that they're looking at and determining if you're going to get it or not. And usually you find this out at your plea hearing, by the way. So even if you were indicted, arrested, door kicked in, office building kicked in, whatever, and taken to jail, that doesn't necessarily mean because you're sitting in jail, you're not going to get pre-sentence release. You're not going to get federal bond. This is pretty much determined at your plea hearing. And so, so don't freak out if you're in jail and you're waiting for your initial hearing in front of the judge, an arraignment, or if you're waiting for a plea hearing and you're still sitting in jail and you feel that you should qualify for pre-sentence release, but it hasn't happened yet. It may very well still happen. Now, after your plea hearing, if you're still in county jail or in a holding center or whatever, it's safe to say you're not going to get it, and you can have your lawyer inquire to the judge as to why that is if it's not apparent to you. So that's a little something. We're coming up on 2 years that I've been home from prison. And I'm going to do some videos about that, about where I'm at now, about the journey, about, where I was, on this day, a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And, I think that some of you who are more interested in my journey and my personal experience will find that interesting. So I do intend to upload some content pertaining to that. As always, my email will be in the description if you'd like to contact me for any reason. I'm happy to be of whatever assistance I can to you in this journey or while your loved ones are going through this journey. There will be a link to the merchandise line if you'd like to get a FedPhoenix hoodie or coffee cup or, t-shirt. The FedPhoenix fam, right, is us, is you, is me. The FedPhoenix fam is, pending, for lack of a better term, federal inmates, current federal inmates, former federal inmates, the loved ones of all three of these categories. The FedPhoenix fam is us. The FedPhoenix fam is anyone with a general, sincere, curiosity about the federal prison system or about reentry or about, being the loved one of a person who's going through either of those things. It's about humanizing the inmate, acknowledging that these are people. And just because a court found them guilty of whatever, little, some embezzlement or whatever the heck it is, doesn't mitigate the fact that they're a human being and they're deserving of being treated and viewed as such. And it certainly doesn't change the fact that why people see inmates being abused and neglected and just going through all kind of crazy stuff, and they go, well, you did the crime, do the time. Psychologically damaging someone who's going to be returning to your community, as most inmates eventually will, is really not in your best interest as a member of the community. So even if you lack the empathy or the insight to see human beings as human beings, is because you can slap a label on them. Incarcerated, black, disabled, crazy, whatever. A lot of people have these labels that if they can put it on you, you lose being a human in their eyes, which is disgusting, but it is what it is. But even if you're that selfish and shallow, the reality is the majority of these people will be returning to their communities. These people may be running the daycare that your grandkids go to. These people may be the nurse's assistant at your mother's doctor's office. These are going to be people who will live in the community with you and will probably go out of their way to hide the fact that they have been incarcerated because of all the stigma associated with it, because of people like you, the judgmental people that find some, higher level of value for themselves and devaluing others. But so the FedPhoenix fam is also those who are supportive of the fact that people are people. Incarcerated persons are in fact people. That we all make mistakes in life. Some we get caught, some we don't. Some are criminal, some are simply moral. It is what it is. And that's okay. The important thing, I think, is to be a decent human being at your core, and to try to improve the world, your world, with whatever degree of reach you have, whether that's something as small as smiling at your neighbor when you check the mail, whether you're in a greater economic bracket and you're opening orphanages in third world countries, making sure kids are vaccinated and fed, whatever. But so anyway, so the merch line, a link to the merch line will be in the description as well. I am working on my first book that should come out sometime by the end of this year. I did like my hair color, so let me know what y'all think about that. What else? Oh, if you would like to donate, or to donate to the brand FedPhoenix, or to tip me for the information I'm providing, feel free to do so. And the link of every video is also a link to my, the information for my Cash App, my Venmo, and my PayPal. And yeah, I think I've covered everything. If you've not already subscribed, please do. It costs you nothing. It certainly does a world of good for me, and I greatly appreciate it, sincerely. And so with that, good day, God bless. If you or your loved one does not know yet if you're going to get pre-sentence release, if this is something that's concerning to you, I would certainly advise to speak to if you're free, the Federal Probation Department. If you're not free, just your lawyer, and say, I'm curious if this is a likely thing for me or not. And you got to remember too, if you don't get it, even though that really sucks, that time you're serving in county jail or in a holding facility is time off your sentence. So you can look at it as you're essentially starting your prison time before you even know how much you're going to do. So once you find out how much you're going to do and you get sentenced, and the clock has already started on the time you're serving. So, and some judges, if your lawyer is persuasive enough, can actually sometimes get the judge to do a 2-for-1 on time served. So, because it's obviously the conditions in county jails are much more difficult, in holding facilities than in actual prisons. It's a lot more unstable. It's a lot more volatile. It's a lot more negligent and dehumanizing. And sometimes if you got a good lawyer, they can make an argument that because of the conditions within the county jail, you should get 2-for-1 for the time served for that. And if you can get that, and I've only seen a couple people pull it off, very impressive. So with that, I'm going to get off here. Got a lot to get done, but I just wanted to drop a little video and holler at y'all, and I'll talk to you later. Good day. God bless.